Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into something wild, messy, and honestly, kind of relatable finding love in the Middle Ages. Yeah, you heard that right. Forget swiping, right? Or sliding into DMs. We're talking about a time when romance was less about heart eyes and more about, like, how many goats you could bring to the table. So, grab a snack. Maybe hit that like button if you're feeling it. And let's step into a world where dating was basically a high-stakes business deal with a side of poetry. Oh, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there joining us. Picture this. You're in a medieval village. Maybe a drafty castle if you're fancy. The air smells like wood smoke and questionable stew, and you're wondering how to catch someone's eye. Maybe you spot a cute villager juggling onions like a pro, or a knight with a surprisingly clean tunic. Your heart's doing a little flip. But hold up. This isn't a rom-com. In the Middle Ages, dating as we know it, not a thing. You don't just stroll up, compliment their shoes, or, their hose, and ask them out for mead. Nope. Your love life is already being planned by your parents, your lord, or maybe even a priest who's way too invested in your future. If you're a noble, your marriage was probably arranged before you could even spell your own name. Betrothals happened when you were, like, 6, and you might not meet your future spouse until the wedding day. Imagine that showing up to your own wedding like, "Hi, I guess we're doing this." It's not about whether you vibe or have the same taste in lute music. It's about land, titles, and making sure your family's alliance game is strong. Love, that's a bonus, not the main event. Now, if you're a peasant, things are a bit less intense. But not by much. Your family's still calling the shots. Love isn't really the priority. Survival is. Maybe your dad knows a guy with a solid pig. Or your mom's got her eye on a girl who can churn butter like nobody's business. Next thing you know, you're courting. Which basically means your families are haggling over who gets the better deal. Romance, more like a practical merger. You're not dreaming of candlelit dinners. You're hoping your future spouse doesn't hate your cooking. But don't get it twisted. People in the Middle Ages weren't robots. They felt butterflies. They got crushes. They probably blushed when someone smiled at them in the market. The problem: acting on those feelings was tricky. Falling in love before marriage was risky. Falling in love outside marriage. Scandal City. You might sneak a glance at the baker's apprentice or scribble a secret poem about the way someone looks while shearing sheep. But you're not supposed to make a move. Love was for poets and dreamers. Not for people trying to keep their family's cow count stable. So, let's say you're crushing hard. Maybe it's the way they carry a basket of turnips with confidence, or how they don't flinch when the village rooster goes rogue. You're smitten, but before you even think about making a move, you've got to ask yourself, what's my value on the medieval dating market? If you're a guy, you better have something to offer land. Tools, maybe a hut that doesn't leak when it rains. A charming smile is cute, but it's not paying for firewood. If your family's already promised the good horse to your older sibling, you might be out of luck. Priesthood's looking real appealing right about now. If you're a woman, your family's got to come through with a dowry. That's the medieval equivalent of your Tinder profile. Except instead of a bio, it's coins, clothes, or maybe a flock of slightly aggressive geese. No dowry. Tough luck. You're not getting married unless someone's feeling really charitable. And don't think your wit or your killer embroidery skills are enough. Without a dowry, you're basically stuck practicing your spinning wheel solos. Now, imagine you actually like someone. You lock eyes while hauling water from the well. There's a spark, a moment, a vibe. You're thinking, this is it. This is my medieval meet cute. Except it's not, unless your families are on the same economic level. That spark might as well be a campfire in a rainstorm. For nobles, it's even worse. Your marriage isn't just about you. It's a political chess move. You're not a person. You're a contract with legs. Peasants, you're marrying because your family's field is next to their family's pigsty. Passion's nice, but water rights are forever. Still, you try to make it work. Maybe you slip them a little gift. A carved wooden spoon, a handful of wildflowers, or your least broken pottery shard. It's not much, but it's something. If they smile back, you're on cloud 9. If they don't, well, maybe they're just shy. Or maybe they're not into you. Either way, the real flirting isn't flowers, it's economics. Your families are sizing each other up, making sure the deal makes sense. Love, that's something you hope grows later. Like a crop you didn't expect to survive the frost. Okay, let's switch gears. What if you're not a peasant worrying about pigs, or a noble stressing over treaties? What if you're a knight, all shiny armor and questionable hygiene? Welcome to the wild world of courtly love. This isn't dating. It's like medieval performance art with extra longing. Courtly love was this weird noble hobby where you, the knight, pick a lady, usually someone already married, and swear to adore her from a distance. No, not like a creepy stalker. It's supposed to be noble and poetic. You write songs about how her eyes are like the moon or whatever, and you suffer dramatically, like you're out here sighing so hard, people think you've got a lung condition. You wear her colors at tournaments, maybe joust some guy just because he looked at her too long. The lady, she's supposed to act flattered, but keep you at arm's length. Like a glacier with better manners. She might toss you a ribbon or a cryptic note, but that's it. The whole point is to feel big feelings without ever actually doing anything. It's like medieval texting, but with more metaphors and fewer emojis. The best part, everyone knows it's mostly fake. Courtly love was a way to channel all that romantic energy without messing up the social order. You get to be dramatic, write bad poetry, and flex your devotion, all while keeping it chill. But if you cross the line into actual romance, scandal, adultery was a no-go, and nobody wanted to deal with that kind of drama. So you pine, you perform, and you hope for a nod across the banquet hall. It's exhausting, but it's better than nothing. Now, let's say you're ready to take things to the next level. You want to tell your crush how you feel. Maybe give them a flower or a really smooth line you practiced in your head. Problem is, you're never alone. Medieval dating comes with a built-in surveillance system. Chaperones. Your mom's watching. Your cousin's watching. The village priest is definitely watching. Probably taking notes for his next sermon. You want to hold hands. Better hope Grandma's knitting nearby and pretending not to notice. Chaperones were there to make sure nothing improper happened. No sneaky kisses. No secret meetups. No accidental hand brushing while passing the bread. The church was all over this, preaching about virtue and writing literal manuals on why flirting is dangerous. Yeah, monks were out here copying anti-flirting guides by candlelight. Even love letters weren't safe. Some monasteries would open them to check for sinful content. It's like your whole love life is under divine spam filter. So, you've got to get creative. You send tokens, the medieval equivalent of a heart emoji, a glove, a ribbon, maybe a slightly used sleeve if you're a knight feeling extra. It's subtle, it's sweet, but it's also super vague. Like, does this glove mean I love you? Or I ran out of laundry? Nobody knows, but everyone's pretending they do. You pin that token to your cloak, tie it to your sword, and hope it sends the right message. For peasants, tokens are simpler: a carved stick, a stitched cloth. It's not fancy, but it's honest. And in a world where love's on lockdown, that little gesture feels like a revolution. By now, you're probably thinking, medieval romance sounds like a lot of work. And you're right. Between the chaperones, the dowries, and the fact that your entire village is invested in your love life, it's a miracle anyone got married at all. But they did, because even in a world obsessed with land and livestock, people still dreamed of something more. They stole glances. They wrote poems. They carved spoons in the dead of night. Love wasn't the goal, but it was there, sneaking through the cracks like sunlight in a stone castle. So, that's where we're leaving things for now, right? In the middle of the longing, the plotting, and the awkward gift-giving. Next time, we'll dig into what happens when you actually try to confess your feelings. And trust me, it's a wild ride. If you liked this, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what you think about medieval dating. Would you survive it? I'm not sure I would. See you in the next one. Hey, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're picking up right where we left off, diving deeper into the chaotic, heart-pounding, and occasionally goat-filled world of medieval romance. Last time, we talked about how love in the Middle Ages was less about candlelit vibes and more about land deals and chaperones who never clock out. Tonight, we're cranking it up a notch. How do you actually make a move when your entire village is watching and the church is ready to slap you with a sermon for smiling too long? So, hit that like button if you're ready, subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Let's get into it. So, you're in love, or at least medieval level in love, which is like 70% longing, 20% confusion, and 10% wondering if you should have gone for the miller's kid instead. You've exchanged a sneaky glance at the market, maybe slipped them a carved spoon that took you 3 nights to whittle. Your heart's racing, but here's the problem. You can't just talk to them, not alone. Anyway, there's always someone, your mom, your nosy neighbor, or a priest who's way too good at popping up unannounced, making sure you don't cross any lines. So, what's a love-struck medieval person to do? You get sneaky. You get poetic. You get tokens. Tokens are like the medieval version of sending a risky text at 1 a.m. They're small, symbolic gifts that say, "I'm into you," without saying it out loud and getting you both in trouble. If you're a knight, you might send your crush a glove. Or because knights are extra, an embroidered sleeve. Yeah, you're literally mailing part of your outfit. Romantic, right? If you're a lady, you might toss back a ribbon, a lock of hair, or a tiny pendant. It's sweet, but it's also a minefield. Give the wrong person the wrong token, and suddenly you're betrothed to someone who smells like stale ale and has a lazy eye. For peasants, it's simpler, but just as meaningful: a wooden carving, a stitched handkerchief, or maybe a really nice turnip if you're feeling bold. The point is, tokens are subtle. You pin that ribbon to your cloak, tie that glove to your belt, and let the village gossip network do the rest. Everyone knows what's up, but nobody says it outright. Plausible deniability is the name of the game, but tokens aren't just cute. They're risky. If the wrong person gets wind of your little gift exchange, rumors spread faster than the plague. Imagine you send a ribbon to your crush, but her brother intercepts it and thinks it's from someone else. Next thing you know, you're dodging an angry dad with a pitchfork. Or worse, you get a token you didn't ask for, and now you've got to figure out how to return it without starting a feud. Thanks for the sock, but I'm good isn't exactly a smooth move. Still, when it works, a token feels like magic. It's a tiny piece of your heart, handed over in a world that's trying to keep you apart. And when they keep it, when you see that ribbon tied to their sword, or that carving tucked into their belt, that's the medieval equivalent of getting a U up. Reply at 2 a.m. Game-changing. Okay, so you've mastered the art of cryptic gift-giving. Now you want to actually talk to your crush. Good luck, because medieval dating is basically espionage with worse outfits. Let's say you're a young woman. You're never just going for a walk. You're going for a walk with your cousin, her aunt, and probably a random villager who's way too invested in your posture. Even fetching water from the well feels like a covert op. Someone's always got eyes on you. If you're a guy, it's not much better. You show up at her house with a flower, and her dad's sharpening a knife in the doorway. Her mom's stirring a pot that hasn't boiled since noon, and the priest just happens to stroll by for no reason. It's like your whole love life is being live-streamed to the village group chat. The church is the ultimate buzzkill here. They've got rules for everything. How close you can stand, what you can say, even how long you can look at someone before it's sinful. Priests were out here preaching about the dangers of flirting like it's the apocalypse. Some even wrote manuals, literal anti-flirting guides, warning about the evils of a coy smile or a lingering glance. Imagine a monk hunched over a candle, scribbling 500 pages about why holding hands is a one-way ticket to eternal regret. And if you think you can sneak a love letter past them, think again. Some monasteries had a side hustle opening letters to check for immoral content. Your spicy poem about their eyes like starlight might end up as evidence in a church trial. Divine spam filter activated. So you pivot to the one place where you might get a tiny bit of freedom. Festivals, harvest feasts, maypole dances, Saints' Day celebrations. These are your shot to flirt without getting excommunicated. For a few glorious hours, the rules loosen up. There's music, there's ale, there's someone rocking a flower crown, like they invented confidence. If you're a peasant, you might flex by winning a sack race or juggling some stale bread rolls. Nothing says marriage material like catching a greased pig without face planting. If you're noble, you're out here reciting poetry on the spot, comparing your crush's smile to a sunrise or some other glowing thing you definitely didn't rehearse. Dancing is where it gets real. The maypole dance. Basically a giant excuse to hold hands and spin in circles while everyone pretends it's not flirty. A well-timed twirl or an accidental hand graze can say more than a whole book of poetry. But even here, you're not free. Your mom's watching from the sidelines. The priest is side-eyeing you. And some bard's probably writing a song about your vibe that'll get you in trouble later. One wrong move, and your flirty spin becomes the village's hot gossip for the next month. Still, for those few moments, you're alive. You're laughing. You're dancing. You're pretending love isn't a contract. It's the closest you'll get to modern dating. And you're soaking it up. Now, let's say you're done with all the sneaking and spinning. You want to go big? Write a love letter. This is the medieval equivalent of posting a public story with a heart eyes emoji. It's bold, it's dangerous, and it could absolutely backfire. Love letters were the way to confess your feelings. But you had to be cryptic. You can't just write, "Yo, I'm into you." You've got to go full poet mode. My heart is a weary pilgrim, lost in the forest of your grace. If you're literate, you're scribbling this on parchment or vellum, maybe sprinkling it with flower petals for extra flair. If you're not, you're begging the local scribe to help, which is its own kind of awkward. The real challenge is delivery. You can't just hand it over, too risky. You need a middleman, a loyal servant, a bribed monk, maybe your little sibling, who doesn't fully grasp what's at stake. Some folks even used minstrels, who'd sing your poem in the town square and pretend it's anonymous. Super subtle. But here's the catch. If that letter falls into the wrong hands, you're toast. If it's too spicy, you might get accused of heresy or lust. If it's too vague, they might not even know it's for them. And if you accidentally send it to the wrong person, like that one noble who wrapped a love letter around a fish and sent it to the wrong lady, you're in for a world of embarrassment. True story. They're married now. It's fine, despite all the risks. People wrote. Some of those letters survived, tucked away in dusty archives. They're full of longing, metaphors, and a quiet kind of bravery. In a world where every move was watched, putting your heart on parchment was like shouting your feelings from a castle tower. You're risking gossip, punishment, maybe even a church trial. But you do it anyway, because sometimes a folded scrap of words is the only way to say what you can't say out loud. So, you've sent your letter. You've danced at the festival. You've survived the chaperones. Things are looking up. But here's the kicker. None of this guarantees you'll end up together. Your family still has to approve. The dowry's got to check out. And the stars, yeah, the actual stars have to align. Astrology was a big deal back then. If your crush was born under a cursed moon, or Venus is in retrograde, your love might be doomed before it starts. And don't even get me started on omens. Drop a loaf of bread while looking at them. Bad sign. See a raven fly overhead. Forget it. Your grandma's already planning your single life. Love in the Middle Ages wasn't just about you and your crush. It was about your family, your village, the church, and maybe even the cosmos. But despite all the rules, people kept trying. They sent tokens. They wrote poems. They stole moments at festivals. Because even in a world obsessed with contracts and cows, the heart's got a way of breaking free. That's where we're pausing for now, right at the edge of confession, where love's about to get real or crash and burn. Next time, we'll dive into what happens when you actually try to seal the deal. And let me tell you, it's a roller coaster. If you're loving this, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. Could you handle medieval romance? I'm not sure I could. Catch you in the next one. Joe, what's up? Everyone. We're back for the final chapter of our medieval love saga. And let me tell you, it's about to get intense. If you've been with us, you know dating in the Middle Ages was a wild mix of sneaky tokens, chaperone surveillance, and poetry that could land you in church jail. Tonight, we're going all in. What happens when you're ready to lock it down and get married? Spoiler. It's less about love and more about contracts, cows, and some serious family drama. So, grab your favorite drink, hit that like button if you're vibing, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Oh, and drop a comment with where you're watching from. I'm loving seeing all your locations. Let's dive into the medieval endgame. So, you've done the hard part. You've sent the cryptic love letter, survived the maypole dance without tripping, and somehow convinced the village you're not cursed by a bad omen. You're in love, or at least as close as you can get, in a world where feelings come second to property lines. Now it's time to get married. And let me warn you, this isn't a dreamy sunset ceremony with fairy lights. Marriage in the Middle Ages is a deal. Think less vows from the heart and more legally binding livestock exchange. If you're a peasant, it's still a big moment, but it's pretty straightforward. You round up a few witnesses, Maybe your neighbor who's always borrowing your shovel, and head to the local priest. Oh, there's some Latin you don't understand. A quick blessing, and boom, you're hitched. But behind the scenes, it's all business. Your family's handing over a dowry, could be coins, a pig, or a blanket that's only mostly moth-eaten. The groom's family might counter with a bride price, like a horse or a few chickens. It's not romantic, but it's practical. You're not just marrying a person. You're merging resources to survive another winter. Oh, and there's a checklist. Who gets the cow if you die? What happens to the land? Romance is cute, but crop rotation is forever. If you're noble, buckle up, because your wedding is a full-on political summit. It's not just you and your betrothed, it's your parents, their parents, a priest, a scribe, and probably some random cousin who claims he studied law once. You might not even know the person you're marrying. Your family's been crunching the numbers. Their estate needs your fields. Your dowry cancels their debts. And your crests look dope together. You're basically a walking merger. And love's not even on the guest list. You stand there, looking fancy, nodding when someone asks you to repeat something in Latin, while the real action happens in the backroom deal-making. Once you're married, it's for keeps. Divorce, not really a thing. The church sees marriage as a holy sacrament, sealed by God, and a whole lot of public shame. If you want out, you need an annulment. And good luck with that. You've got to prove something wild, like one of you was already married. You're secretly cousins, or best case scenario, the marriage was never consummated. That last one means someone's got to swear on a Bible that nothing happened, which is as awkward as it sounds. Even then, you need paperwork, a bribe, and maybe a miracle. Most people just grit their teeth and deal. But here's the thing, not every marriage was a cold transaction. Some couples actually grew to like each other, shared chores, raising kids, surviving a bad harvest. Those things build a bond. It's not sonnets and roses, but it's real. You're hauling firewood together, laughing about how your cow outsmarted the neighbor's dog. That's medieval love, and it's kind of sweet in its own way. Now, let's say you're a noble, and you're done playing by the rules. You're not here for land deals, or your dad's alliance with some baron. You want to marry for love. Congrats, you're about to start a scandal that'll make the village bard rich. Eloping in the Middle Ages is like setting your family's reputation on fire and roasting marshmallows in the flames. If you're a noble lady and you run off with, say, a squire who smells like adventure and bad decisions, you're not just rebelling, you're tanking your family's political game. Picture this. You sneak off to a shady monastery, bribe a monk to marry you with 2 chickens as witnesses, and think you're living the dream. Meanwhile, back home, your dad's threatening to siege your new husband's vegetable patch. Your mom's crying into her tapestry, and the gossip's so juicy, the whole shire's talking about it. If you're the groom in this scenario, you better have a fast horse. Best case, you keep your bride and your dignity. Worst case, you're excommunicated, disowned, or worse, but sometimes it worked. If your elopement was too public to undo without more embarrassment, your family might just sigh and move on. In rare cases, these love-fueled rebellions became legends, songs, poems, stories whispered at feasts about the couple who chose heart over duty. It's risky, it's dramatic, but it's proof that love could still punch through the medieval rule book. Okay, let's talk about the economics of love, because nothing says forever like a good dowry. If you're the bride, your family's putting together a package money, land, livestock, maybe a fancy set of spoons, if they're flexing. This isn't a gift, it's a statement. A big dowry says your family's got clout. A skimpy one might mean they're trying to offload you before you start arguing with the goats. The groom gets the dowry, but don't get too excited. It's not like you're keeping it. It's part of the household now, managed by your husband, and hopefully not lost in a bad bet at the tavern. If the marriage ends, say, your spouse dies or pulls a "I'm joining a monastery" midlife crisis. Getting your dowry back is harder than convincing a mule to move. In some places, it's the groom's family paying a bride price instead. They hand over goods. Think horses, cloaks, or a few pigs to buy the bride. It's less about romance and more about compensating her family for losing her labor. Who's going to milk the sheep now? Exactly. Either way, someone's writing a receipt, and love's just a footnote. But what if marriage isn't your path? Maybe your dowry was too small, or you're the spare son who didn't inherit the good land. Or maybe you just really vibe with chanting and candles. Welcome to the monastery or convent, where you've sworn off romance for poverty, chastity, and a whole lot of prayer. Sounds simple, right? Except even here, love finds a way to mess things up. Picture this. You're in a quiet cloister, surrounded by stone walls and the smell of old books. And you catch Brother Anselm giving you that look during Vespers. Suddenly, your prayers are sounding a lot like love poems. Falling in love in a monastery was a big no-no. Like, get whipped or sent to a sheep farm level of no-no. You've promised your heart to God, not to Sister Beatrice, who keeps sneaking you extra bread. But humans are humans, and sometimes a shared laugh over a spilled hymn book turns into something more. Some monks and nuns wrote secret letters, disguised as deep thoughts about theology. Your soul is a radiant beacon in my darkness. Sounds holy until someone reads it too closely. There were scandals, secret herb garden meetups, midnight confessions that weren't exactly about sin. Sometimes it ended in exile or public shaming. Other times, couples escaped, ditched the robes, and got married. Most just went back to praying, red-faced and swearing it was all a misunderstanding. Love's messy, even in holy places. So, you've made it through the contracts, the scandals, the sneaky letters. You're married, or you've dodged it for a life of turnips and solitude. Either way, you've learned one thing. Love in the Middle Ages was a battlefield. You had to outsmart chaperones, dodge bad omens, And hope your dowry didn't include a cursed goose. But through it all, people kept trying. They wrote poems, they danced, they risked everything for a glance across a feast. Because even in a world of rules and receipts, the heart's got its own agenda. That's the end of our medieval love story. But don't worry, we've got more wild history coming up. If you loved this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. What's the wildest thing you'd do for love in the Middle Ages? I'm thinking I'd stick to carving spoons. See you in the next one. Hey, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're leaving the castles and chaperones behind for something totally different. A story that's raw, epic, and straight-up legendary. We're talking about Tomyris, the warrior queen of the Massagetes, a nomadic tribe who ruled the wild steppes of Central Asia. This isn't a tale of thrones or fancy courts. It's about a woman who led with grit, fought with fury, and took down one of the biggest empires of her time. So, grab a drink, hit that like button if you're hyped, and subscribe if you're new here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there. Ready? Let's ride into the steppe. Imagine a world without walls. No cities, no castles, just endless plains stretching under a sky that feels alive. This is the land of the Massagetes, a nomadic people who lived east of the Caspian Sea around 530 BCE. Their home was the steppe-think, rolling grasslands, harsh winters, and summers so hot you'd swear the ground's cooking. They didn't build temples or write books. Their wealth was in horses, their power in mobility, and their history in the stories they told around campfires. These were people who rode before they walked, shot arrows from galloping horses, and lived in tents they could pack up faster than you pack for a weekend trip. Freedom was their religion, and Tomyris was its high priestess. Tomyris wasn't your typical queen. She didn't inherit a golden crown or rule from a marble palace. She was a warrior, a leader, a mother, and when pushed, a force of nature. The Massagetes were a confederation of tribes, tough as nails, surrounded by enemies who wanted their land or their submission. Her people were tattooed, battle-hardened, and fiercely independent, with a culture where women could fight alongside men, not as a cute side gig, as a way of life. When Tomyris took charge, nobody blinked. She wasn't breaking rules. She was the rule. She led with a bow in one hand and a spear in the other. And her authority came from her ability to keep her people free. Now, most of what we know about Tomyris comes from Herodotus, a Greek historian who loved a good story almost as much as he loved exaggerating. Writing decades after the events, he pieced together her tale from travelers, rumors, and probably a few wild campfire yarns. Is every detail true? Maybe not. But even if half of it's real, Tomyris was a legend. Her story starts with a shadow creeping across the steppe. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great. This guy wasn't just any king. He was the rock star of ancient conquerors. He'd already taken down Lydia, Babylon, and half the known world without breaking a sweat. His empire was massive, his army unstoppable, and his ego, let's just say it matched. When Cyrus turned his eyes east to the massage tay, he figured it'd be another easy win. Spoiler! He was very wrong. Cyrus kicked things off with a move that sounds romantic, but was anything but. He sent Tomyris a marriage proposal. On the surface, it's like, oh, a king wants to marry a queen. But Tomyris saw through it faster than you spot a scam email. This wasn't about love, it was about control. If she married Cyrus, her people would become just another cog in his empire, and she'd be reduced to a trophy wife. No thanks. She sent back a polite but firm nah, probably with a side of don't try me. Cyrus, not used to hearing no, didn't take it well. If he couldn't charm her, he'd conquer her. He gathered his army, crossed the Araxes River that separated his empire from her lands, and set up camp. Game on. Tomyris wasn't sitting around waiting for him to show up. She was already moving, rallying her warriors, consulting her chiefs, and prepping for war. The massage tay didn't fight like Persians, with neat rows and heavy armor. They were chaos on horseback, swift, deadly, and impossible to pin down. Picture hundreds of riders in leather armor, faces painted, bows drawn, ready to hit and run. Tomyris wasn't just defending her land, she was defending a way of life. The steppe was her home, her court, her everything. Submission wasn't in her vocabulary. Then Cyrus pulled a classic imperialist move. He set a trap. Under his general Harpagus, the Persians left a fancy camp behind, stocked with wine, food, and all the luxuries nomads didn't usually mess with. It was bait, and Tomyris' son, Spargapises, took it. He led a group of warriors to check it out, raided the camp, and big mistake, got drunk on the wine. The Persians swooped back in, catching them off guard. Spargapises was taken alive, his men scattered or dead. When Tomyris got the news, it wasn't just a military loss, it was personal. Her son, her heir, was now in enemy hands. She sent Cyrus a message that dripped with steel. Give me my son and leave. Or, I swear by the sun, the master of the massage tay, I'll make you drown in blood. Cyrus didn't listen. He probably thought he had the upper hand. Big army, big empire, one captured prince. But he underestimated two things, a mother's love and a queen's wrath. Spargapises, humiliated by his capture, killed himself in Persian custody. When Tomyris heard, the world shifted. This wasn't about territory anymore. It was about vengeance. Her son was gone, and Cyrus was about to learn what happens when you cross a queen who rides with the wind. That's where we're pausing, right at the edge of a war that's about to change everything. Tomyris is gearing up, her heart broken, but her resolve unbreakable. Cyrus thinks he's got this in the bag, but he's about to meet his match. If you're hooked, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. What would you do if you were Tomyris right now? I'm thinking I'd be sharpening my spear and practicing my war face. Catch you in the next one. What's up? Everyone, we're back. And things are about to get wild. If you caught the last chapter, you know Tomyris, the badass queen of the Massagete, just lost her son. Sparga to a dirty trick by Cyrus the Great. Her heart's shattered, but her will, it's iron. Tonight, we're diving into the showdown that made her a legend. A battle so brutal, it sent shockwaves through the ancient world. So, grab something to munch on. Hit that like button if you're ready, and subscribe if you're loving these epic tales. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's riding with us. All right, let's hit the step. We left off with Tomyris reeling from her son's death. Sparga, captured after falling for Cyrus's fake camp, full of wine and goodies, took his own life in Persian custody. For Tomyris, this wasn't just a loss. It was a call to war. Grief is heavy, but mix it with rage, and you've got a force that can topple empires. Tomyris didn't crumble. She didn't lock herself in a tent to cry. She climbed onto her horse, grabbed her weapons, and swore an oath that'd make the gods take notice. Cyrus would pay, and he'd pay in blood. The Massage-Te weren't your average army. They didn't march in shiny formations or roll up with siege towers. They were a storm on horseback, hundreds, maybe thousands, of warriors in leather and scale armor, wielding short bows and spears, moving like the wind itself. Their faces were painted. Their loyalty was to Tomyris, and they were ready to ride into hell for her. She called her tribal council, rallied her chiefs, and got to work. This wasn't about glory or conquest. It was about survival, vengeance, and making sure the Persian king learned his lesson. Cyrus, meanwhile, was feeling pretty cocky. He'd taken down Babylon, Lydia, and more without breaking a sweat. To him, the Massage-Te were just another speed bump on his world domination tour. He'd already outsmarted Sparga with his trap, so he figured he could do it again. Big mistake. Tomyris wasn't her son. She'd seen his tricks, studied his moves, and she was ready to flip the script. According to Herodotus, our Greek storyteller, who's probably adding some spice, she set her own trap, and Cyrus walked right into it. The details are murky, but here's how it went down. Tomyris knew the step like the back of her hand. Every ridge, every river, every patch of grass, she used that to her advantage, positioning her warriors to lure Cyrus's army into a bad spot. The Persians, weighed down by their heavy armor and fancy gear, weren't built for the hit-and-run chaos of steppe warfare. Tomyris's riders struck fast, firing arrows from horseback, vanishing before the Persians could swing back. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and Cyrus was starting to sweat. Then came the big clash. Herodotus calls it one of the bloodiest battles of the ancient world. And honestly, you can feel it. No fancy speeches, no orderly lines, just screaming horses, clanging blades, and a queen fighting in the thick of it. Tomyris wasn't some distant general sipping wine in a tent. She was out there, bow in hand, cutting down enemies like she was born for it. Her warriors followed her lead, their arrows raining down, their spears finding gaps in Persian armor. The steppe ran red, and when the dust settled, Cyrus the Great, the guy who conquered half the world, was dead. But Tomyris wasn't done. She'd promised blood, and she delivered. According to Herodotus, she had Cyrus's body dragged to her, His head was cut off and stuffed into a wineskin filled with blood. Human blood. Because why not go full drama? She looked at it and said something like, "You wanted blood, Cyrus. Now drink your fill." Is that exactly how it happened? Maybe not. Herodotus loved a good, gory ending. But the point stands. Tomyris won. She didn't just beat Cyrus. She ended him. The most powerful king of his time, taken down by a nomadic queen with no throne, no palace, just a heart full of fury and a cavalry that didn't quit. The aftermath was seismic. The Persian Empire didn't just lose a battle. It lost its unstoppable vibe. From Babylon to Egypt, whispers spread. Cyrus was dead, killed not by a rival king, but by a woman who ruled the wind. For the Massagete, it was a victory that echoed across the steppe. They didn't celebrate with parades or statues. Nomads don't do that. Tomyris went back to her people. Her justice served. Her son avenged. She didn't try to take Persia's throne or build an empire. That wasn't her style. She fought to keep her people free. And she did. What's wild is how rare this was. Most rulers, after a win like that, would have gone full conqueror mode, grabbing land and power. Not Tomyris. She stayed true to her roots, leading her tribes, living by the rhythms of the steppe. Her victory wasn't about expanding, it was about protecting. And that's why her story hits so hard. She wasn't fighting for glory, she was fighting for her son, her people, and a way of life that no empire could tame. But here's the bittersweet part. After this, Tomyris fades from history. No records of her later years. No grand tomb. No gold plaques saying Tomyris was here. The Massagete didn't carve their stories in stone. They carried them in memory, in songs, in the wind. Herodotus is our only real source. And even he's working off second-hand tales. Some historians think he jazzed things up, that maybe Cyrus died another way. But even the skeptics admit someone dealt Persia a massive blow. And all signs point to a queen, a mother, a warrior who turned grief into a reckoning. That's where we're leaving it. Tomyris standing over her enemy, her victory complete, but her story just beginning to ripple through time. Next time, we'll explore how her legend grew, how it inspired artists, writers, and even modern nations. If you're loving this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments, what's the most epic thing you'd do for revenge? I'm not saying I'd go full wineskin, but maybe see you in the next one. Hey, what's good, everyone? We're back for the final chapter of Tomyris's epic saga. And trust me, this one's all about legacy. How one queen's story outlived empires and keeps inspiring us today. If you've been riding with us, you know Tomyris took down Cyrus the Great, avenged her son, and made the Persian Empire rethink its life choices. Tonight, we're zooming out to see how her legend grew, why it matters, and why she's still a symbol of untamed power. So, grab a snack, smash that like button if you're feeling it, and subscribe if you're new. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there. All right, let's hit the step one last time. The dust has settled. Cyrus is dead. His head may be in a wineskin. Maybe not Herodotus loves his drama. Tomyris stands over the battlefield, her vengeance complete, her people free. But this isn't a Hollywood ending with trumpets and a victory parade. Tomyris doesn't build a palace or carve her name in stone. She rides back to her tents, her horses, her tribes, and keeps living the nomadic life she fought for. The Massage Te don't do monuments. They carry their history in stories, songs, and the rhythm of hooves on the step. And yet, somehow, Tomyris's name doesn't fade. It grows, spreading far beyond the grasslands, into the minds of poets, painters, and people hungry for tales of defiance. Let's start with Herodotus, our Greek gossip king. He's the only reason we know about Tomyris, writing her story decades later based on travelers' tales and whatever rumors were floating around. Was he 100% accurate? Probably not. The guy loved a good plot twist, severed heads, blood-filled wineskins, queens talking smack to corpses. But even if he embellished, he chose to tell her story. In a world full of bearded warlords and cocky kings, he spotlighted a nomadic queen who brought down a titan. That's not nothing. His account, written around 430 BCE, turned Tomyris into a myth, a cautionary tale for empires, and a hero for anyone who loves an underdog. Why did her story stick? Easy. It's got everything: a fierce queen, a tragic son, a cunning villain, a bloody battle, and a finale that's equal parts gruesome and poetic. If you were chilling in ancient Athens, hearing this from a bard, you'd be hooked. It's not just a war story, it's a human one. A mother who lost everything and turned her pain into power. A leader who didn't need a crown to rule. A woman who looked at the world's greatest empire and said, "Not today." That kind of vibe doesn't fade. It gets passed down like a torch. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and Tomyris is still making waves. Chroniclers painted her as a savage Amazon, half warrior, half myth. By the Renaissance, she was a painter's dream. In 1622, Rubens put her on canvas, calm and regal, holding Cyrus's head, while courtiers stared in awe. Another artist showed her dunking his head in a golden vessel of blood, because apparently everyone loved the gore. To these Europeans, Tomyris was a symbol. She could be the noble savage, a warning to prideful kings, or a feminist icon, depending on the day. She was whatever they needed: a mother's fury, a ruler's wisdom, or just a straight-up badass who didn't play. Writers couldn't get enough of her either. In the 18th and 19th centuries, she popped up in plays, novels, even philosophy books. Enlightenment thinkers debated her like she was a case study. Proof women could lead, or a reminder that emotions could wreck a kingdom. Either way, she stayed in the spotlight. But here's the kicker. Her own people, the Massage Te, didn't leave a single record. No carvings, no tombs, no Tomyris was here etched in a rock. They faded into history, swallowed by other nomadic tribes. Yet Tomyris endured, carried by outsiders' pens. Proof that a good story is stronger than stone. By the 20th century, she was reborn in Central Asia. In places like Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, where the steppe still whispers, Tomyris became a national hero. Statues went up. Her name hit school books, and politicians quoted her to flex independence. During the Soviet era, she was a symbol of resistance against empires. Ironic, since she'd probably have hated any government telling her what to do. Modern scholars love her too, digging into her story, not as a bloodthirsty barbarian, but as a legit head of state. A woman who led armies, made strategic calls, and negotiated from strength. She's even in video games now, a playable leader you can pick to crush your enemies. That's range. What's crazy is we don't even know what she looked like. No coins, no busts, no selfies, but we know what she stood for. Strength, vengeance, freedom, legacy. In a world that loves to forget women who fight, Tomyris refuses to stay buried. She's like a blade hidden in the grass, always ready to cut through the noise. Renaissance painters saw her as a warning. Modern nations see her as pride. But at her core, she's a mother who lost her son, a queen who lost her patience, and a warrior who changed history without ever sitting still. Tomyris wasn't alone. Either she's part of a long line of women who led with swords, not just babies. Before her, there was Shamuramat, an Assyrian queen who built cities and crushed rebels. Around her time, Scythian women cousins of the Massagetæ were buried with battle scars and bows. After her came Boudica, the Celtic queen who torched Roman settlements, and Zenobia, who defied Rome with her own empire. These women weren't exceptions. They were a pattern. They led, they fought, they won, and history still tried to call them unusual. Tomyris proves they weren't. Female power wasn't rare. It was just written over by men with quills and agendas. Her legacy is a paradox. She left no palace, no dynasty, no gold-plated armor. Her story hinges on a few pages from a guy who probably never saw the steppe. But those pages sparked something eternal. For over 2,000 years, Tomyris has haunted the world's imagination. To some, she's a savage. To others, a hero. To me, she's a reminder that power doesn't need a throne. It needs a pulse. She's the wind that howls across the steppe. The story that outlives marble. The queen who made emperors look small. So, next time you hear about a great king's fall, think of Tomyris. Not a general, not a politician, but a woman who turned grief into a blade and carved her name into history. Her final warning, come for me, and you'll drink your fill of blood, still echoes. And honestly, I believe it. That's the end of Tomyris's tale. But we've got more stories coming. If you loved this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. What's your favorite part of her story? I'm torn between the battle and that savage wineskin move. Catch you in the next one. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're switching gears to a story that's all about ambition, sweat, and a dream that changed a nation the Transcontinental Railroad. This isn't about knights or queens. It's about steel, steam, and the people who built America's backbone in the 1860s. It's gritty, it's epic, and it's got more drama than a reality show. So, grab a drink, hit that like button if you're pumped, and subscribe if you're new here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there. Ready? Let's lay some track. Picture America in the mid-1800s. The East Coast is buzzing cities, factories, ports, all that industrial vibe. The West, it's a whole different world. Gold fields, deserts, mountains, and a frontier that feels like another planet. Connecting the two is a nightmare. If you want to go from New York to California, you've got two options. Sail around South America for months, dodging storms and pirates, or take a wagon across 700 miles of wilderness, praying you don't die of dysentery or get robbed by bandits. Either way, it's a gamble, and it's slow, but there's a dream floating around a railroad that could tie the country together. Coast to coast, steel rails, steam engines, a direct line from Atlantic to Pacific. It sounds impossible, but to some, it's destiny. This isn't just about travel. A transcontinental railroad could do big things. Unite a divided nation, speed up trade, move armies, open the West to settlers. It's the kind of idea that gets politicians hype and tycoons counting their dollars. But building it, that's a whole other beast. You're talking about blasting through mountains, crossing deserts, bridging rivers, all while a civil war is tearing the country apart. It's going to take money, muscle, and a ton of political will. Oh, and the land. It's not empty. It belongs to indigenous nations who've been there for centuries, and they're not signing up for this progress willingly. Enter 1862. The Civil War's raging, brother against brother. But Abraham Lincoln's thinking bigger. He signs the Pacific Railway Act, a game changer that greenlights the project. Two companies get the gig. The Union Pacific, starting in Omaha, Nebraska, and heading west. And the Central Pacific, kicking off in Sacramento, California, and pushing east. They'll meet somewhere in the middle, like a handshake made of iron, to sweeten the deal. The government's throwing in massive incentives, land grants of up to 640 acres for every mile of track laid, plus huge loans. We're talking millions of dollars in today's money. The race is on, not just to build a railroad, but to grab as much land and cash as possible. On paper, it's a marvel of engineering. In reality, it's about to be one of the toughest construction jobs in history. The Union Pacific's got the Great Plains ahead flat, but full of challenges like raids and brutal weather. The Central Pacific, they're staring down the Sierra Nevada mountains, a granite wall that laughs at your pickaxe. Both companies need workers, and they need them fast. Thousands of immigrants, Irish, Chinese, freed, African Americans will answer the call, along with veterans and dreamers looking for a paycheck. These aren't executives or engineers. They're the hands that'll break rock, lay rails, and die in the process. The payoff could be huge, but the cost human, cultural, environmental is going to be steep. For the indigenous nations, the railroad isn't progress, it's a threat. The Lakota, Cheyenne, Shoshone, and others see the tracks cutting through their hunting grounds, scaring off buffalo, bringing settlers and soldiers. To them, this isn't a dream, it's an invasion. Resistance is coming, and it's going to be fierce. The railroad's not just a line on a map, it's a scar across their way of life. The Central Pacific breaks ground in Sacramento in 1863, but they hit a wall literally 80 miles in. The Sierras are no joke. Towering peaks, avalanches, snow that buries camps. They don't even have dynamite yet. Just black powder and hand tools. The Union Pacific, meanwhile, is laying track across Nebraska, dealing with their own headaches, raids, labor disputes, and towns that spring up and vanish like ghosts. Both sides are racing, not just against each other, but against time, weather, and a nation that's still bleeding from war. This is where the story starts, 1862, with a dream that's half genius, half madness. In 7 years, 2 sets of tracks will meet in the Utah desert, and America will never be the same. But before that golden spike gets driven, there's a lot of sweat, blood, and heartbreak to come. That's what we're diving into next time, the workers. The battles. The grind that made this dream real. If you're hooked, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. Would you have signed up to build the railroad? I'm thinking I'd stick to safer jobs, like herding goats. Catch you in the next one. Joe, what's good? Everyone, we're back. Diving deeper into the epic saga of the Transcontinental Railroad. Last time, we set the stage. America in the 1860s, split by war and distance, chasing a crazy dream to connect East and West with steel. Tonight, we're getting into the grit, the workers who built it, the battles they fought, and the land that paid the price. This is where the story gets real sweat, sacrifice, and a whole lot of struggle. So, grab a snack, hit that like button if you're ready, and subscribe if you're loving this. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there. All right, let's get to work. We're picking up in 1863, with the Central Pacific breaking ground in Sacramento. They've got a monster in their path, the Sierra Nevada mountains. These aren't cute hills, they're granite giants, prone to avalanches. Snow drifts deeper than a house, and rock that laughs at your tools. Dynamite's not a thing yet. So they're using black powder, picks, and sheer stubbornness. Every mile feels like a fist fight with nature. The Union Pacific, starting in Omaha, has it easier. Flat plains stretch ahead. But they've got their own problems. Raids, labor disputes, and a boss more interested in stocks than steel. Both companies are racing for land grants and loans, laying track, like their lives depend on it. Spoiler, for many, they do. Let's talk about the real heroes, the workers. The Central Pacific starts with Irish immigrants and white laborers. But the Sierras are brutal and A lot of them quit. Enter the Chinese immigrants, mostly from Guangdong province. By 1865, over 10,000 Chinese workers, 80% of the workforce are on the job. They're paid less than white workers, housed in worse camps, and face straight-up racism. But they're the backbone of this project. These guys are carving tunnels through solid rock with hand drills and explosives that could kill them in a blink. The infamous Tunnel Number 6 takes nearly 2 years, with workers living in snow-buried camps, climbing out through chimney-like shafts. Avalanches, rock slides, and blasts claim dozens of lives. No one's keeping an exact count. Because, well, nobody's really checking. The Chinese crews don't just endure, they innovate. They hang in baskets over cliffs, chipping away at stone like it's no big deal. They build wooden trestles that soar over ravines, engineering marvels that hold up trains like it's magic. When they can't go around a mountain, they blast through it. In winter, snow hits 40 feet deep, but they keep going. Eating rice, they cook themselves, and staying healthier than the whiskey-guzzling crews. Skeptics called them weak at first, but by 1867, the Central Pacific's passed the Sierras. And it's clear, without these workers, the railroad's a pipe dream. Over on the Union Pacific, it's a different vibe. Their workforce is mostly Irish immigrants, Civil War vets, and freed African Americans looking for a fresh start. The Great Plains let them lay track fast, too, sometimes 3 miles a day. But easy terrain comes with big risks. This is indigenous land Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Pawnee, and the railroads cutting through their hunting grounds, scaring off buffalo, planting telegraph poles on sacred sites. To them, the trains aren't progress. They're a death sentence. Resistance is fierce. Leaders like Red Cloud lead raids, hitting camps, ripping up rails, targeting surveyors. The USC government responds with forts and troops, turning construction into a war zone. Workers lay track with rifles nearby, knowing an attack could come any second. The Union Pacific's camps are chaos temporary towns called Hell on Wheels. They pop up overnight, full of gambling, drinking, and fights, then vanish when the tracks move on. Workers live in tents, battling heat, cold, and starvation when supplies run low. Their boss, Thomas Durant, is more focused on rigging stocks than running a railroad, which means delays, strikes, and shoddy planning. Still, the crews push west, hitting Cheyenne by 1867 and staring down the Rockies. The land's flat for now, but the real fight's not the ground. It's the people, the politics, and the question of what uniting a nation really means when you're building over someone else's home. Let's not sugarcoat it. The indigenous perspective is heartbreaking. The railroad doesn't just cross their land, it tears it apart. Buffalo herds, central to Plains tribes' food, culture, and survival, are slaughtered by the millions. Some passengers even shoot them from trains for fun. By the 1880s, herds of tens of millions are down to a few hundred. Settlers follow the rails, staking claims on tribal lands, backed by the government's Homestead Act. Soldiers guard the tracks, enforcing treaties that get broken before the ink dries. Conflicts like Red Cloud's War flare up. Bloody and desperate, the tribes fight hard. But they're up against an industrial machine with endless resources. The rails keep coming, and with them, a future of reservations and displacement. Back to the workers. The Chinese, Irish, and freedmen aren't just building a railroad. They're building America. But they're not getting the credit. They're underpaid, overworked, and often forgotten. The Central Pacific's Chinese crews live in segregated camps, eating what they can carry, dodging blasts that could bury them alive. The Union Pacific's Irish workers face raids and disease, drinking to forget the grind. Freed African Americans, some just years out of slavery, work for a chance at a better life. But the pay's low and the danger's high. Cooks, blacksmiths, teamsters, everyone's part of this machine. But when the history books get written, it's the tycoons in top hats who'll get the statues. By 1867, the Central Pacific's through the Sierras, hitting the flat deserts of Nevada and Utah. The Union Pacific's crossing Wyoming, eyeing the Utah meetup. The race is heating up, and it's not friendly. Both companies are laying track like maniacs, sometimes building parallel lines just to claim more land grants. It's wasteful, it's reckless, and it's all about the money. The workers don't see those profits. They see the frostbite, the broken bones, the friends who don't make it home. That's where we're pausing, right in the thick of the grind, with the finish line in sight, but the cost piling up. Next time, we'll hit the final push. The golden spike, and what this railroad really meant for America. If you're loving this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. Could you handle the railroad life? I'm thinking I'd tap out at the first avalanche. Catch you in the next one. What's up, everyone? We're back for the final chapter of the Transcontinental Railroad saga, and it's time to bring it home. We've covered the dream, the grind, the workers who broke their backs, and the indigenous nations who paid the ultimate price. Tonight, it's all about the finish line, the golden spike, the celebration, and the legacy of a project that stitched America together while tearing others apart. This is where history gets made. But not everyone gets a seat at the table. So grab a drink, hit that like button if you're hyped, and subscribe if you're new. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's out there. All right, let's drive that spike. It's the late 1860s, and the Central Pacific and Union Pacific are in a dead sprint. They're not just building a railroad, they're racing for cash and glory. The government's paying by the mile, with land grants and loans that make every track a gold mine. The Central Pacific, fresh off conquering the Sierra Nevada, is blasting through Nevada and Utah's deserts. The Union Pacific, speeding across Wyoming, is dodging raids and labor strikes. Both sides are laying track so fast, they are sometimes building parallel lines, knowing half will get scrapped. It's chaotic, it's greedy, and it's pushing everyone to the limit. The Central Pacific's Chinese workers are setting records. In April 1869, They lay 10 miles of track in a single day, a feat that's still unmatched. Picture it! Synchronized teams, rotating shifts, moving like a machine honed by years of brutal labor. The Union Pacific isn't slacking either, but they're messy. Their boss, Thomas Durant, is neck-deep in stock scams, and his mismanagement's causing strikes and delays. Still, the tracks are closing in, zeroing in on Promontory Summit, Utah, where the two lines will meet. May 10, 1869, is the big day. A crowd gathers in the windy Utah desert. Workers, executives, journalists, and a few locals who wandered in. 2 locomotives, the Central Pacific's Jupiter and the Union Pacific's No. 119 sit nose to nose, cowcatchers almost touching a golden spike, engraved with a prayer for unity, is ready to seal the deal. Telegraph wires are hooked up to the hammer, so each swing will send a signal nationwide. Leland Stanford, the Central Pacific's big shot, steps up to swing. The crowd holds its breath. He swings and misses, because of course he does. A worker steps in, drives the spike, and the telegraph clicks. Done! Church bells ring. Cannons fire. Cities from New York to San Francisco lose their minds. The East and West are linked. A trip that took 6 months now takes 7 days. It's a massive win. The U isn't just a country anymore. It's a coast-to-coast powerhouse. Goods flow like never before. Wheat and cattle from the Midwest hit western mining towns, while factory products roll east. Towns sprout along the rails, some turning into cities, others fading when the line shifts. The economy booms. Steel mills, coal mines, timber yards, all feeding the railroad beast. Mail moves faster, news crosses time zones in days, not weeks. Immigrant pour west, chasing land and jobs. The government can now send troops or supplies anywhere the rails reach. Time zones are born to keep trains on schedule. The second industrial revolution kicks into high gear. This is America hitting the gas. But let's talk about who's not in the victory photo. The Chinese workers, who carved through mountains and lost countless lives, aren't invited. They're back at camp. Invisible, the Irish, the freedmen, the cooks and teamsters, none of them get a nod. The frame's full of tycoons in frock coats, posing with hammers they barely swung. These men, Stanford, Durant, Collis Huntington, get rich, shape laws, and buy politicians. Scandals like Credit Mobilier show how deep their claws are in Washington. The workers, they get wages, if they're lucky, and graves, if they're not. For indigenous nations, the celebration's a funeral. The railroad's a steel blade through their lands. Buffalo are nearly wiped out, tens of millions reduced to hundreds by the 1880s. Shot for sport or to starve tribes, settlers flood in, claiming land under the Homestead Act. Soldiers guard the rails, crushing resistance. The Lakota, Cheyenne, Shoshone, and others are forced onto reservations, far from their homes. Sacred sites are trampled, hunting grounds fenced off. Their way of life, nomadic, tied to the land, is choked out. The rails don't just connect America, they erase entire worlds. The environment takes a hit. 2 forests are cleared for ties, rivers bridged, prairies scarred. The buffalo's collapse ripples through ecosystems. Progress has a price, and it's paid in dirt and blood. Yet there's no denying the railroad's power. It shrinks the country, fuels industry, and cements the idea of manifest destiny that America's meant to stretch sea to sea. It's not just a track, it's a mindset. The frontier's not wild anymore, it's reachable, claimable, profitable. The legacy is a paradox. The railroad builds a modern America, connecting immigrants to jobs, markets to goods, and governments to territories. It's a triumph of engineering and will, but it's also a tragedy built on exploited labor, stolen land, and broken promises. The Golden Spike isn't just a symbol of unity, it's a reminder of who paid for it and who didn't get to celebrate. Those Chinese workers, Irish laborers, and indigenous nations aren't in the history book's headlines, but they're the story's heart. So, when you think of the Transcontinental Railroad, don't just see the trains. See the hands that laid the rails, the lives lost, the cultures shattered. See a nation transformed by iron and fire, for better and worse. It's not just history, it's a mirror, showing what progress costs and who gets left behind. That's the end of our railroad journey. But we've got more stories coming. If you loved this, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments. What's the biggest sacrifice you'd make for a dream? I'm thinking I'd draw the line at tunneling through a mountain. Catch you in the next one.